Howdy gang, this is part 2 of the great Jewish Masque, Rade, or the ass in the lion's skin. Written in 1936 and very insightful. A common complaint of the Jews is that the other peoples, among whom they have chosen to dwell, cruelly herded the Jews into ghettos. This is misleading. The idea that the Jews should live in an area specially reserved for them, came from the Jews themselves. And their hypertrophied sense of their own importance and other unpleasant qualities, made the Jews so unpopular that their neighbors agreed to their request and set aside an area in which the Jews might practice the rites and customs which they claimed were theirs and indulge their cravings for feeling superior, secrecy, and separateness. It has been said that there is nothing original about the Jews except their feeling of separateness. But the Jews had no feeling of separateness before they came into contact with the Aryans, who invented everything, and with a state of society based on castes. From the conquering Aryans, the Jews adopted a sense of superiority and a feeling of separateness, and these, like the monotheism which the Jews adopted at about the same time, speedily became an obsession. An oft-repeated boast of the Jews is that they invented monotheism. This foolish pretense is, of course, entirely misleading, for the Jews were among the most ignorant and uncultivated of the peoples who had monotheism thrust upon them, before they were ready to receive it. The Jews were polytheists who became, first, monolaters, and then later and in comparatively recent times under the influence of the Babylonians and the Persians, monotheists. It was not until they had been in Babylon for some time that idolatry ceased among the Jews. It was in Babylon, too, and at about the same time that the Jews adopted the hostile genius Satan, the demon Asmodeus, the angels Gabriel, Raphael, Michael, Uriel, etc., the stories of the rebel angels and of the battle in heaven, and, half-heartedly, the idea of the immortality of the soul and the resurrection of the dead. Semi-atheist, still the case today. Before about 410 BC, when the Great Masque commenced, the Jews did not differ from their neighbors except that they were less cultured and less civilized. But having become worshippers of one God, even though that God was a borrowed God, the Jews became fanatics obsessed with a ludicrously exaggerated idea of the importance of themselves and this God. There is, however, nothing unique or original about either the Jews or their gods. According to their own stories, the Jews worshipped stones, revered an oak tree, bowed down to images, and adored a bull. Saturn or Cronus was the ancient one, the father of all the gods, who was worshipped by various Semitic tribes as a stone, and in Phoenicia under the names of Israel and Saturn, with human sacrifices, which continue even today on Oprah. To call upon Saturn, it was necessary to don black garments, to approach the sacred place at a suitable time, Saturday, like a man sunk in sorrow, to burn specially made incense, and at the moment when the smoke rose, to raise the eyes to the star and say, O Lord Saturn the dark, the harmful crafty sire who know it all whiles, who are deceitful, grant this or that. Providers note brown dwarf star Saturn glowed brightly for 7 days then exploded, let there be light, burping out the electrically charged comet Venus which whizzed past Earth striking a massive lightning bolt miles wide toward the Earth. Down the electric beam excavated rock mountains from comet Venus flowed, bombarding the Earth, causing mass extinctions and death of most humans. End of the world stuff. That's why these ancient survivors thought they were God's chosen, because they wrongly thought they were the last tribe standing. And why everybody was fearful of Saturn. And do sacrifices to this very day. Electric Universe video link provided below. The Jews adored a queen of heaven, Astarte, or Mylitta, and burned incense to her. The Jews worshipped also Moloch, Saturn, and, in addition, Baal and Chemosh, and offered human sacrifices to them, after which in some instances they ate the victims. Some authorities, indeed, believe that the Passover was originally a sacrificial cannibal feast in which the firstborn was the victim. At no time before about 430 BC, was monotheism a distinctive feature of Jewish worship. Like his predecessors, Jehovah was not Jewish. His name has been found in inscriptions dating from about 2800 BC and again in others dating from about 2100 BC. He was associated with the moon, and took on the attributes of such of his predecessors. The God of the Jews has never been the father of all men, an ideal of love, justice, mercy, compassion, etc. But on the contrary, the God of the Jews has always been a God of vengeance down to the 10th generation, just and merciful only to the Jews and a foe to all other peoples, denying the latter human rights and commanding their subjection to the Jews so that the Jews may appropriate their possessions and rule over them, exterminating all those who object to this arrangement. And Jehovah has gradually changed in modern times. Many Jews are thus positivists and nihilists with this important qualification, that when they speak of God they do not mean humanity but only the Jewish part of it, and while they yearn to destroy, they wish to destroy only what is Gentile. Jehovah is he who overcomes nature, say the magicians. The decisions of Talmud are words of the living God. Jehovah himself asks the opinion of earthly rabbis when there are difficult affairs in heaven. Laughing out loud, Jehovah himself in heaven studies the Talmud standing, he has such respect for that book, say the rabbis. Thus, too, a neo-messianist, named Baruch Levi, wrote to Karl Marx, a Jew, whose real name was Mordecai, as follows: the Jewish people, taken collectively, will be its own Messiah. His reign over the universe will be obtained by the unification of the other human races, meaning Euro-invasion today, the suppression of frontiers, and the establishment of a universal republic. In this new organization of humanity the sons of Israel will become without opposition the directing element everywhere. Above all, they will succeed in forcing on the working men masses, the stable control of certain among them. The government of the nations forming the universal republic will all pass, without effort, into Israelite hands, by favor of the victory of the proletariat. Individual ownership will then be suppressed by the governors of the Jewish race, who will administer in all places the public wealth. Thus will be realized the promise of the Talmud that, when the times of the Messiah are come, the Jews will hold under their keys the properties of all the peoples of the world. This is the end towards which the activities of all who participate in the Masque, whether Jews or their dupes, are directed. And, in modern times, the 6 points of the star formed by the interlaced triangles, have been made to symbolize, among many other ideas, the principal means whereby this end is to be reached. These 6 points may be outlined, roughly, as follows. First, religious. To undermine and discredit all Gentile, and especially all Christian creeds, and to introduce, encourage, and propagate crazy cults, unhealthy mysticism, pseudoscience, and sham philosophies. This was written 1936. Second, ethical. To introduce and propagate debasing codes and practices, including the illicit drug trade, the illicit liquor trade, and the white slave traffic, to corrupt morals, weaken the marriage bond, destroy family life, and abolish inheritance, and even heritable names, among all other peoples, especially among the northern races. Third, aesthetic. To introduce and foster the cult of the ugly and the aberrant, LGBT, and whatever is decadent, debasing, and degenerate in art, literature, music, and the theater, etc. Fourth, sociological. To break up large estates, and abolish aristocracy, to set up plutocracy and a money standard, to encourage vulgar display, singers, performers today, extravagance, and corruption, to provoke the proletariat to envy, discontent, incendiarism, sabotage, and to foment class warfare. Fifth, industrial and financial. To bring about unemployment and want, 1929, to lower ideals of craftsmanship and abolish pride in handicraft, to encourage greed for profit, and the standardization of the cheap and shoddy, to bring about centralization, and the formation of trusts and cartels, to abolish private ownership and to establish state monopolies, reserve banks, and a World Bank. with the control of gold in the hands of the international directors. 6th. Political. To secure control of the press, broadcasting, cinema, stage, and all means of publicity, to secure the presence of agents on all Gentile councils, committees, etc., and in confidential posts, such as private secretary to highly placed persons, to maintain an effective espionage upon all Gentile activities, to start and keep alive dissensions in all Gentile institutions, and thus break up all other political groups in their component parts, and set these at enmity with each other, to discourage, decry, and extirpate patriotism and pride of race, and, in the name of progress and evolution, and under pretense of promoting universal peace and human brotherhood, to set up internationalism as an ideal, thus undermining national unity and weakening government, to bring about disarmament and the establishment of an international police force, controlled by a League of Nations, thus preparing the way for those who, unobtrusively, will gain control of the League of Nations and the International Bank, and through these, rule the world. The international directors, however, never act openly or directly, they always keep in the background, and work secretly and indirectly. Pressure is brought to bear from all points, but whence it comes is carefully concealed. No Gentile must be allowed to discover its source. Genetic natural conspirators these people are. Thus it is evident that however ridiculous the mongrel Judean ass may appear in the royal skin of the Babylonian lion, his ludicrous posturings and ungainly capers must be viewed with suspicion. His dubious antecedents include vile strains from the Bolshevik followers of the ass of Typhon, from the outcasts who worshipped the swine of the satanic set, from the runagate refugee rabble of Jerusalem, and from the lawless and predatory banditti of Palestine. Conceived in dishonor, he was born in inglorious captivity, schooled in the dark practices of savage cults, such as those of Saturn, of the gloomy Israel, of the disreputable Tsabaoth, and of Asthareth, and reared amid scenes of perfidy, turbulence, and anarchy. Flattered by lying tales of a wonderful past, and deluded by borrowed prophecies and plagiarist promises of a still more glorious future, he is consumed with lust for world domination. And under the lion's skin, wears hatred as a garment and nurses a sinister purpose. Devoid of scruples, and realizing his inability to fight his way openly to leadership, he is determined, with all the stubbornness of which his obstinate nature is capable, to reach his end by cunning, by duplicity, by any means however ignoble, even if these entail the destruction of all who are nobler than he, and the degradation of the rest to a position lower than even his own. So that at last, he may reign unassailed, in universal peace, over such dregs of the once human race as may still remain to soil the desecrated ruins of a besmirched and polluted world. In every country, subversive, disruptive, and disintegrating forces of every kind, are to be encouraged and organized by professional propagandists and trained organizers, who, after the manner of all revolutionaries, will invent fictitious rights, fictitious groups LGBT etc., thus creating imaginary wrongs, exploit real grievances, and create want, thus producing discontent and an atmosphere of revolt, and then blame the existing social and industrial systems and point to the red road of revolution as the only way of escape. When the aristocracy and bourgeoisie of all Gentile peoples have been removed, and all non-Jewish institutions have been discredited and trampled underfoot by a systematically bestialized and scientifically depraved proletariat, the international directors hope that their Jewish mummers, under cover of great secrecy, and protected by armies of agents provocateurs and a vast network of secret police, will be able to continue their soul-destroying mask in the character of a wealth-controlling world-dominating ruling race. Jewry International Directors declared war on Germany 1933. Jewry International Directors declared war on Europeans recently via the refugee invasion.